All right. What's up, everyone? Glad you could make it. Let's do this. Welcome, Pit Pat. Welcome in, Red. Let's see. Sup, Poopman Jones? Nice, thanks. Thanks for the support. But yeah, something that I've been thinking on. I've had several people tell me that they were disappointed with the reasons provided by Joe Schmidt, Majesty of Reason, for his recent conversion to Catholicism. And I understand that his video that was scheduled to drop today got delayed to either tomorrow or Wednesday. I'm still interested in waiting to see that, but I've had several people who looked at, I guess my blueprint is the way that I call it, because I still want to flesh it out a lot more. But I had a lot of people say that they were disappointed because they were hoping for something similar to my approach. So I'm thinking of maybe doing a series with my long-term stuff, or a long-form video, breaking down and kind of walking through my argument. I know it's not going to be probably as in-depth as some would like, as I'm still working on certain parts and trying to strengthen up, and but I think that would be a good something that I've had a couple of people have show a little bit of interest. What was it? Jesus and Whatnot versus Born Again Atheist, I think, was it? Anarchist. Yeah, I don't want to say anything negative about, because I didn't see the debate. But Jesus and Whatnot has said some things on their account where not wrong per se or against Catholic teaching. It's very its intention with some of it, and I didn't agree with the way that he presented some of the stuff. So, not that he's necessarily a bad person or anything, but I just I disagree with the way that he presented some of the information, and I felt like it was misleading, or at least not as accurate as it should have been. But, well, sorry to hear that. Like, I always hate it to see when disrespect or intellectual dishonesty is done on any side. Whether it's, I was literally just speaking with Ogar, because I've actually got scheduled, by the way, coming up, save the date, and I'll make a couple more announcements, and it's on my YouTube already, or at least the post is. But I am scheduled to do a moderated debate on Mega Bloodbath on September 5th at 8 p.m. Central Time with, the debate is going to be against Leophilus on the contingency argument. And I was speaking with Ogar, because he had, even though he's a necessitarian, and he and I disagree on, the existence of contingencies, or if a necessary thing destroys contingency in general. He had a really good argument that I really appreciated, that showed why brute contingencies collapse into it being a necessary thing. And he and I were talking, and he and I both share a very similar goal. We might argue against an argument that's presented to us, but we both prefer to argue against the absolute strongest version of an argument, as opposed to as opposed to just any argument that's been presented to us. But we do have a guest. Real quick, Coda. Just right in regards to your question about the seed of Moses being infallible. Off the top of my head, I do not think the seat of Moses ever had the power of infallibility because that's tied specifically with the keys of binding, but they did have authority that people were subject to. So the question of the seat of Moses having authority is true, and you can extend that to papal authority, but papal infallibility is from something else, and I think Vatican I talks about it being an extension, because if the chair of Peter is the head of the church, and the church, ordinary magisterium of the church, has infallibility, then by extension, the chair of Peter ought to have that same infallibility. But we do have a guest in the request. Let's see if.
Hello.
Hey, how are you doing?
Good. How are you?
I'm doing all right. And how old are you?
I'm 40.
40. All right. And what brings you up here today?
So I came up. I was first. I guess I had two questions.
Mm-hmm.
One is how is your Greek?
Not great. Almost
Okay.
non-existent. My Latin is a
Uh,
little bit better, but almost non-existent.
maybe that'll help too. But I guess the first question is regarding an argument for a creator.
Mm-hmm.
I, I, if I understand right, every model um, that there's like 15 models out there for our um, our universe,
Mm-hmm.
or the past of our universe, and it seems to me that every single one is it revolves around an infinite sequence of finite things. It seems like, and I guess that's my first question. Is that true? Where if
No, there are models out there. So I'm assuming you're referring to like eternalism and people who claim that the universe always existed
yes,
in relation to like B theory, block theory of the universe. Um,
yes,
so, e- so a very common misconception a lot of people have is something existing for all time does not mean it exists for infinite time, and eternity in the scientific community just means for all time. It's not making a claim about whether time itself is infinite or not. And so there is a TikToker by the name of Dr. Blitz who's effectively got his PhD, and I think his area of expertise is in like quantum mechanics and um, these
I know who
cosmos.
you're talking about.
Okay,
Yeah.
perfect. So he has stated time and time again that there are multiple cosmological models of for a B theory block universe where time is finite, where there is a first and last moment of time. So for I'm assuming you're a Christian. So for us as a Christian, we would hold to that kind of model where there's a first moment, um, and there's also models of it being of an infinite past. To help alleviate so that way, then you're not concerned with whether the universe is eternal or not as an argument against the existence of God. Um, are you familiar with Thomas Aquinas?
Yes.
Okay.
The
Uh,
first move, unmoved mover, and the other five
yeah.
the five.
So if you pay close attention to his arguments, and it's most confusing in the first cause argument, but if you pay very close attention to all of his arguments, not just in the five ways, but everywhere he makes an argument for God, he does not appeal to the universe being finite or having a temporal beginning, because he believed and has stated, actually I should probably find out exactly where he stated it so I can refer people to it, but he has stated that it is impossible using natural reason alone, which would be the sciences nowadays, to demonstrate the impossibility of the universe having an infinite past. And so all of his arguments were structured to work whether the universe had a finite past or an infinite past. And he also believed that because God doesn't change, then if God created, God was always creating. And if God is always creating, then in a particular sense, even if the universe is dependent and requires God to exist, it still always existed. But it still had a first and last moment, which is the article of faith that we hold to as Christians. But the universe, so like in the Thomistic understanding, you could say that the universe is both eternal and finite, and that is perfectly acceptable within the Thomistic classical theistic understanding. Now, if you disagree with Thomas Aquinas, then you're going to need to find other ways to respond to the cosmological objections, but Thomas Aquinas did show, even before B theory existed, that God existing and being the source of the universe is not contradicted by the universe being infinite or by it existing eternally, because it existing eternally is dependent on the fact that God is creating eternally.
I see, but nevertheless, it's not by eternal. It just means it's going to last forever, but it's not beginningless,
So
right?
um, you want to be careful with the term beginning, especially in these cosmological models, because beginning usually indicates that there was when it wasn't, and then it came to be. And while God is the source of the creation of the universe and of space time and all of reality, because God always is creating, then the universe, even if it has a first moment, what we might call a quote unquote beginning, it it's not the case necessarily where God turned nothing into the universe. It's that God created the universe without it being reliant on anything prior. That's what it means to create from nothing.
Yeah, and we can go back and so okay, but that means it's not beginning. That means it has. Here's the thing, though. It
Mhm.
has a beginning, right? Straight
So
up. Like you can't.
it has a beginning in the sense that like a line segment, a geometric line segment has a beginning, as in it has a first point, but a true geometric line segment doesn't quote unquote come into existence in the sense that a lot of people, when they're talking about something having a beginning, uh so that's why you want to be careful with the terminology. And the reason why I find a lot of strength in the approach that Thomas Aquinas did is you're going to have people that are agnostic on this question or hold to an infinite past. So don't bother trying to show them that there was a first moment, because even if, and again, even if they hold to a first moment, they can say that the first moment always was. So what Thomas Aquinas did is he said, hey, regardless of all of that, whether it's finite, whether it's infinite, and whether it always was, it still is dependent on an unmoved mover, on a first cause, on um, a necessary thing, on
That that confuses me a lot because when you say that it's an eternal past, for example,
it's an infinite past, not
or
eternal. Yeah,
infinite.
not eternal.
Yeah. So an infinite past, for example, the issue with that is we run into that paradox where you can't trans.
So,
You
and I know
you
the
probably know
paradox.
what I'm about to say,
Yeah, I
right?
know. I know the paradox you're talking about. So that paradox only works if A theory or presentism is true. It does not work for B theory. Um, because, as an example, you know that a geometric plane is infinite, right?
A geometric plane.
Yeah, so like a line on a geometric plane goes on for an infinity, correct?
Well, when I say what in my mind when you're saying that, I'm thinking of a line.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Is just like, the reason why I'm saying geometric line is I don't want it to be like, well, I'm thinking of a train line, which is finite. But yes, a line on a geometric plane is infinite. versus like a array or a line segment. So you have this infinite line on infinite space, right?
Uh-huh.
Okay. Now the argument is you can't go from the beginning of the infinite line to point A, which is correct. Because there isn't really a beginning to start from, so there's no way to start to get to A. But that's not what happens for us. What happens for us is we start at point A, and then we travel to point D. The way that I like to describe it is, for B theory, time isn't this thing I like to describe it is, for B theory, time isn't this thing that's changing us or that we're moving or that has this ontology. It's just a way of measuring things, the same that space is measuring things. That's why it's called the fabric of space
If I
time.
understand right, B theory, with B theory, would you say time is the fourth dimension
Yes, that's exactly what it
and
is.
a
It is.
date is just coordinates? Yeah, okay.
Yes. And so it's not the case that something has traveled through all of the coordinates per se, or that the but what's happening is you have something that's entering into the space-time dimension at a particular set of coordinates, arbitrarily so, in is the either arbitrarily or with reason depending on perspectives, but it enters into the space-time coordinate system at a particular set of coordinates and then travels a finite distance along that coordinate system, even if that coordinate system is itself infinite. So when
Okay.
when
But can't I block universe or a universe with the fourth, time being the fourth dimension,
mhm,
B theory of time?
yep,
Are you saying that can have a beginning or it can be infinite? What are you saying there?
it's science hasn't shown one way or the other, and so both are live options. So
Okay.
so
Um,
the
can
arguments that I like are the ones that don't care which option is the case and work regardless. So because I understand what you were trying to do is you were trying to argue against an infinite regress and using an infinite past as a kind of infinite regress, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So the what the infinite regress is doing is it's not talking about an infinite chain. It permits and allows for an infinite chain. What an infinite regress that Thomas Aquinas is talking about is what's called in modern terms a vicious regress. And a vicious regress is one where the thing we're trying to explain never gets explained. So, people talk about like the infinite chain. So you have chain A, and you ask, why is chain link A hanging there? Oh, it's hanging there because of chain link B. Well, why is chain link B hanging there? Well, it's hanging there because of C, and so on infinitely. Do you ever explain why the chain link in its totality is hanging? No.
No.
That's the infinite regress. But an infinite time isn't a causal explanation. It is about dimension and about, like I said, it's about that dimensional aspect. And so, what you need to do is, like I said, it's about that dimensional aspect. And so, what you need to do is, all right, I am back. I think I'm back. Um, but yeah, like I was saying, is that the chain itself can be infinite. That's not the problem. The problem is the thing we're trying to explain explained by the infinite chain? If it is, great. We can move on. If it's not explained by the chain being infinite, that is where we need the necessary thing or the first cause or these other explanations that Thomas Aquinas puts forth.
Okay, so that what I've learned from this is I just need to learn more. But I, but I do have a question.
Yeah.
Tell me then, how is it? Do we have to overlook the second law of thermodynamics if we want to entertain an infinite universe?
From my understanding of what the second law of thermodynamics is, that it's about a closed system and the universe is an open system. So the second law of thermodynamics doesn't apply to the universe.
Right, but see, this is where, so, and this is what I'm talking about then. You can't have an infinite universe that's closed.
Even if the universe is finite, it still wouldn't be a closed system because we observe matter and energy and different. Uh, we observe the stuff coming in and out of existence. We see it get destroyed in black holes, and we also see energy, in a sense, being created through Hawking radiation. Um, and
I thought that was just radiating from black holes, not necessarily being
Well,
created, but being released.
black holes is the absence of information. So it's literally something coming from the lack of information. Information is destroyed via a black hole, and from and yet we see this Hawking radiation being spewed forth from this lack of information. So it which is impossible in a closed system. That's why even if the universe itself is finite, the universe itself is an open system of energy because we have energy entering and leaving this system.
Well, that's well. Here's the thing. Then I've had the impression then that our universe is closed, and if it is open, what's it open to?
Well, so that's misunderstanding what it means for something to be open or closed. So a closed system is where all of the energy is contained within it. That no energy is coming from outside of the system and no energy is coming from inside the system. But if you had, it's why perpetual motion machines don't work. Because in order for a perpetual motion machine to work, it has to create more energy than what it contains, which would make it an open system. But anything that we use for energy is by definition a closed system because it's moving within this circuit. But we observe energy or the stuff coming in and out of existence, not in the same sense of like where it's entering from something from like a different dimension or something like that, but rather that it wasn't there, then it came to be, and then as well as it gets destroyed or lost through a black hole. And so like basically the a lot of the
You don't think it's just getting transferred once it goes into a black hole and now it's transferred into radiation?
all of the math and everything that we have in regards for the way that black holes work, it is a destruction of information. And so it's as close to nothingness as you're going to get once you cross that event horizon. Now, I'm not a physicist on this, and I could be completely mistaken. Dr. Blitz would probably be the better person to ask about how the universe is an open or closed system. In fact, Tuesdays and Wednesdays he has Ask a Physicist, where the second half he does allow callers to come on up and ask him questions like that. So if you have the opportunity, I would definitely recommend going and asking Dr. Blitz about the universe being an open or closed system, and he'd be able to do a much better job than I am. And I'm probably making some errors here and there. But my understanding is that the reason why we are an open system is because of the existence of black holes.
Okay, but theoretically, if it is a closed system or isolated system, and second law of thermodynamics is true, and the universe is not infinite, then we would all I'm sorry. If it is a closed system
Mm-hmm.
and the second law of thermodynamics is true, then that logically show that the universe does have a beginning 4.8 billion years ago?
Possibly.
Along, because yeah,
Like I said, I'm not an expert, so I'm not sure exactly on how all of that would interact with each other. But the reason why I'm not too worried about it is because all the science points to your first premise of if the universe is a closed system as being false. So
hmm.
that's why I was like, hey, look, you're going on the right path of trying to figure out how do I explain and scientifically. But one, you got to really understand the science. Like if you're trying to use scientific explanation to get to God, you have to understand the scientific explanations as well, if not better, than people like Dr. Blitz. And even then, um, the best route I have found is presenting an argument where if there's two possibilities and one isn't known over the other, such as the universe being having a finite past or an infinite past, making an argument that doesn't care about that. And if you do that, it's a lot more convincing because now, if you talk to someone who is either agnostic to it, like Dr. Blitz, or if you're familiar with Dr. Blitz, I'm assuming you're familiar with Justin from Deconstruction Zone and allegedly Ian, um, or holds to an infinite past like they do, you're able to present an argument that they don't have to abandon those metaphysical worldviews and they will be more open to accepting what you present.
And you think the first mover is supports that,
So
or is that
I
argument?
I don't think the five ways are used or should be used to convince a non-believer. When you understand what Thomas Aquinas was doing, the Summa Theologica was written for his students of theology. And the way that theology, or the time that theology was taught during that period, was you had to get a bachelor's in philosophy first, and then you got your doctorate in theology. So these were people who had spent 4 years studying philosophy and the sciences, and now they're ready to move on to the next level. And this book was designed for them. It'd be so trying to use first off, trying to tell someone to read the Summa Theologica is like trying to tell someone who hasn't taken math to read a book on calculus. It's meant for PhD students. Now that doesn't mean it can't be helpful for
Yeah,
non
tried,
people.
and I'm not at that level.
Yeah. So you got to first understand that. And then, secondly, if you look at the way that he structures, especially his questions about the existence of God, the first question is he asks if God can be demonstrated, which means shown to be true without a shadow of doubt. And he answers yes. And then the very next question he says, by the way, here are 5 proofs. Well, in the Latin and in the language that Thomas Aquinas was writing in, a proof is weaker than a demonstration. So why would he go from, yes, God can be demonstrated, to here are 5 proofs? Because the proofs weren't meant to be demonstrations. The 5 ways weren't meant to be demonstrations. What they were was a way for his students to know how he defines God, so to speak, for the rest of the book. It was justifications on insights into the nature of God, and then he's going to build off of those justifications for the rest of the book. If you want to know his demonstration to a non-believer, you're going to want to look at his work on being an essence, and there's actually free PDFs available online. The one that I tend to recommend is usually I think it's like 20 pages, but that's including commentary within the text itself.
Cool. Yeah, all very good. I think I will hit up Blitz too. You're the second person to recommend him to me, so yeah, thanks
He's
for
he's
that.
very
I would.
he, he's very patient, very good faith. As long as you don't try to poison the water or um, be underhanded, which you haven't, he's going to be very patient with you and very accommodating, and even be willing to grant. It's like, yeah, like this works, but you might want to account for this. Like he's going to be very accommodating and very patient with you as long as you are sincere and honest as you have been. He's going to treat you very well.
Cool. Yeah, thanks a lot. I appreciate it. I'll probably hit you up later.
Absolutely. You have a good one, Rob.
All right, take
All right.
care.
Bye. All right. Um, but thank you everyone for the support so far. I know Poopman Jones earlier sent some stuff, but thank you Nobody on Fire, Bradley Cooper, and Pokegurumi, as well as everyone showing up for the support. Whether it's tapping the screen, leaving a comment. I definitely greatly appreciate it. Now I know that I'm not just yelling out into a void, but currently don't have anyone in the guest request box. So, like as you saw, if you just want to come up, ask about the Thanks Poopman Jones. Um, but if you want to come up, have a question about a particular argument or debate strategy, or even just a general question on Catholicism or philosophy, and you don't even need to be a theist. You can be an atheist. I've had atheists come up, question on Catholicism or philosophy. And you don't even need to be a theist. You can be an atheist. I've had atheists come up. There we go. But I saw that I got a warning that my connection was bad, but it looks like I'm back. But it either will help in my understanding from my own position or show me why my position is false. But I can't do that if I'm arguing against a weaker argument when a stronger version of that same argument exists out there. The only thing I've agreed with Michael Humer on is his description of this phenomenon called weak manning, where you are arguing against a valid position, but it's a weaker version because the interlocutor just doesn't understand the actual position and how to argue it. For Pacio, I have not read Phaser. I should probably read into it, but a lot of the stuff that I've heard people present of him, I haven't been too impressed with his presentation. The commentary on Thomas Aquinas that I would recommend, though, is by Peter Kreeft, the Summa of the Summa Theologica. It's what I read in high school. I think he does a fantastic job of maintaining the depth of the Summa while still presenting it in an understandable way for someone new to Aristotelian metaphysics, as well as cutting down on a lot of stuff that most people who want to read the Summa might not be interested in. So that's what I would recommend on that. I'm not familiar with Eli 5. Explain like I'm 5. Okay. So potency. So Pokagurumi is asking about potency. So in the Aristotelian understanding is that you have a thing, and in that thing, it can't be what it's incapable of being. So, for example, an acorn will never be a cat. So, because of that, it is not in the potential of an acorn to be a cat. Unsolicited Advice, actually, who is an atheist, or at least a skeptic, has some amazing videos on Thomas Aquinas, and he touches on this potency idea. And helps explain it. So if you want it from a non-biased individual, Unsolicited Advice is someone that I would recommend checking out. But the way that potency is understood is it is the collection of everything that this thing could become. So if it's impossible for an acorn to be a cat, then there is no potential for it to become a cat. But if it's possible for an acorn to be eaten, or to become a tree, or to be crushed, those are within its potential. And then actualized, which is the opposite, quote unquote, opposite of potential, is whenever one of those potentialities becomes real. So all potentiality is trying to describe is we observe the thing. These are all the possibilities that this thing can become. And then as it goes through time, it realizes one of these possibilities, and when it finally achieves that possibility, we call that the actualization of it. As I've been explaining to some people, I don't think potentiality actualization works in B theory of time. Um, I would like to think it could, but at best it seems to only work as a description of appearances and not of reality as it is, which I think is where a lot of people get mixed up. Is if B theory is true, then how can things have potential? Which is, it's true. But if you understand it about it being a question of appearances, then it starts to make a little bit more sense. Like, my hair is actually brown, but it is possible for it to be red if I went out and dyed it red. So it has potential to be red. Now, whether or not in B theory of time that ever gets actualized, is a different question altogether. Maybe potentialities could work if we're using it to describe a case of modal possibility. But in order for arguments like the argument for motion, which is talking about this type of potency, it's trying to claim that there is a real change that is occurring, which doesn't necessarily work in the theory of time. But that's a limitation for just one of the 5 ways. And like I said, the 5 ways were never really meant to demonstrate or prove God in that capacity. I hope that answered your question, Poka Gurumi. But yeah, once again, don't have anyone in the guest request box. So if you're, over the age of 18 and you want to work on an argument or have a question on, Catholic philosophy or theology, I'd be more than happy to help out. Floopy, so in regards to divine simplicity being hard to defend, I think it's hard to grasp and understand, and that's an expected reality of divine simplicity, not a bug. So Aristotle points out that in order to understand something, we either break it down into its simpler parts, or we add simpler parts together to come to an understanding. So, an example, if I want to understand what a human is, what do I start doing? Well, it is of the Homo sapien with this, like, I'm breaking it down. And then I want to know about a unicorn. Well, I'm taking a horn, a horse, and combining them together. So knowledge is either the combination of separate things or the taking of a singular thing and breaking it down into its separate parts. Now, if God is divinely simple, our difficulty in coming to understand it is due to the fact that there are no parts for it to be broken down further into. And if we were to try to add something onto it, well, now we're not talking about God, we're talking about God plus something else, which isn't God anymore. It'd be like, well, I want to talk about an apple, but I want to talk about an apple with legs. Well, you're not talking about an apple with legs anymore, you're talking about something different. So that's why talking about God in divine, that is divinely simple, is hard to talk about. I don't necessarily know if it's hard to defend, because I think, especially depending on whether one accepts the existence that things get broken down into simpler parts, it would be hard to defend against priority monists, but they hold that effectively complexities is the ultimate foundation as opposed to a simple being the ultimate foundation. So that's more of a worldview disagreement as opposed to whether or not something being simple is easy to defend or not. I think, though, it's fairly straightforward to show that God must exist as a divinely simple thing. But the ability to understand it is difficult, and in my understanding, I think that's to be expected, especially considering how we come to understand things. I hope that answered your question, Felipe. Hey, Pecho. Uh, yeah. Um, Currently don't have anyone in the guest request box. And just for those curious, this isn't meant to be like a debate space. This isn't hostile. I don't care if you're Christian or an atheist or anything in between. I just want to have good conversation, and if you've got a question on how to make your argument a little bit stronger, I'd love to help you out and go over it. Um, just as a little bit of background on me, I've been studying the Catholic faith for over 20 years now, and I know I look young, but I started when I was like 6 years old, and had a great love for philosophy and theology, and I have an ability on being able to notice something, break it down, and I've also got a great skill set on being able to understand, especially for atheists, where they're coming from, the language they're using, and basically translating theistic terminology and language that atheists can understand, and vice versa. Um, the fact that you've seen, I'm sure most of you see that I've got several atheists in my chat that are very supportive of me. Poopman Jones, Poca Gurumi, Nobody on Fire, Bradley Cooper. Once again, thank you all so much for all the support. Um, and the reason, like, a lot of them push me to do stuff like this because I do have that ability. So if you've got a question or concern about an argument you've got, or even just Catholicism in general, feel free to request up. Um, and then, as you saw, like, if you don't want to request up, feel free to put something in the chat, and I'll yap about it until someone does request up. But let's see. I recently did a video on divine hiddenness. How's it going, Sports World? But yeah, I recently did a video on divine hiddenness that's on my YouTube channel. I've got a scheduled debate on Bloodbath, and scheduled for September 5th at 8 p.m. Central Time, going into I have heard about C theory, and I think it might help at least one way that it described it, Nobody on Fire. But then I saw that it wasn't the way that, or at least it seemed like it wasn't the way that it was described to me, so I need to do more research on it. But I do hold to a kind of eternalism. But as I was saying before, I do have a moderated debate scheduled on Mega Bloodbath's channel on the contingency argument. And I am I've got an idea. People have mentioned that they really like my approach on justifying being a Catholic, and were disappointed. Nothing against Joe Schmidt, but we're disappointed with the way that Joe Schmidt justified his conversion from being agnostic to Catholicism. And so I think I might do a video series going through that process. It's not going to be probably as in depth as what Joe Schmidt would do, but I think a lot of people have shown, people that I've shown have greatly appreciated it. And I think that it might be fruitful for people to see an approach that resonates with non-believers, that I also think works well. As far as Jesus and whatnot, I like a lot of the stuff that he's done, and he seems like a really cool individual. But I know a lot of people are bringing him up because of his debate with Born Again Atheist. I have not watched that debate, so I can't speak on it. But there's been a few videos of his that have caused me to have some hesitation, because while not contrary to the Catholic faith or saying anything heretical, it definitely seems to be in tension, or at least isn't the way that I would describe that particular truth. And I did leave a comment on one of his videos addressing that, but he hasn't responded to that, which, I know a lot of content creators don't respond to comments on their videos. So, but, if you like him, great, more power to you. I just don't agree with some of the stuff that he's been saying. And don't like I said, I don't necessarily agree with at least the way that he presents a lot of stuff. But we got Sports World up. Welcome back.
Hey, brother, you able to hear me?
Yes, I
Hey,
can.
man, good to talk to you. I just wanted to take a few minutes to say thank you so much for
Hmm.
sending some comments and directing me some videos. It's really helpful as I look through and study through some stuff. So first of all, just thanks for that.
Absolutely.
Uh, I would encourage you. I've had a discussion with Jesus and whatnot at one time.
Hmm.
I on with him. I find him to be an intelligent young man, a
Yeah.
very intelligent young man, and I think he has. I think he has. Yeah, I got on to him. I got it with him one time because he said that if he was not a Catholic, that he would have been a Mormon. He'd rather be a Mormon than a Protestant.
That's odd,
And
but
so
yeah.
it is honest. And so wait a minute, we embrace ontological monotheism. They're polytheistic, yet you'd rather be an LDS than a Protestant, which I think he was just trying to be inflammatory. So I really kind of kindly said, no, let's talk about that for a little bit.
Hmm.
But he doubled down on it.
Yeah.
He doubled down on it, just trying to be inflammatory. So I really kind of kindly said, no, let's talk about that for a little bit.
Hmm.
But he doubled down on it.
Yeah.
He doubled down on it in such a way that it offends people. Now that doesn't
Hmm.
mean we compromise the truth, but I think
Yeah.
sometimes he can be it's a little dramatic for me.
Yes.
So your thoughts? Yeah.
Yeah, the video that made me have hesitation, there was someone who was talking about, I'm an atheist and I do good things just because they're good, and I think God would appreciate that more than someone, doing the good thing because God commanded them to do it out of fear of hell.
Right.
And
Right.
he came in and was saying, no, atheists can't do good things because they're good or because they. And he was arguing for divine command theory. And I think you and I touched on this the last time that you were up where.
We
Oh, no,
did. Yeah, we did.
in DMs we touched
In your
on.
writing, in
Yeah.
your writing, you did.
Yes.
Yes.
So, like I said, as a Catholic, I hold to natural law theory, which denies divine command theory. Now, I know that there's different ways that divine command theory can be understood, but the position of the Catholic Church is that an atheist can use natural reason to know that something is good and do good things according to their natural reason. Which is contrary to his statement that atheists don't know the good, or can't do good because they don't, or they don't do good things because they know it to be good. What Catholicism does claim, though, is that it's going to be very hard, if not impossible, for atheists to get out of the is-ought problem. Just because a thing is good, what compels you to do it other than preference? Why ought you do the thing that is good?
Right. What's the ontic referent? Where are you grounding this? What even is good? Right.
Yeah.
What's the scale that you're using? Yeah.
Yeah. Now, my position on that, and from my understanding of it, the Catholic Church's position on it as well, is that, you don't necessarily need to have a grounding to know it, and you don't necessarily need a justification for it to do it.
I don't think I would disagree with that.
Yeah.
with that. Yeah, I agree.
And so and one of my other lives, I was talking to someone in these moral conversations, I think we got to get away from grounding. I think we need to get away from grounding language. I think we need to get away from objective subjective language, because at least for the first one, for grounding language, we can at least get to it at a later point in the conversation. But I think ultimately, when we're having these debates, what we're really trying to figure out is the moral system I am following arbitrary, or are there reason givers for my moral system? And I am perfectly happy, at least for the time being, to work with someone who has reason givers for their moral system. But if their moral system is arbitrary, then we've got problems. We got to work on that. But we can worry about the grounding question later. We can worry about the is-ought question later.
Unpack that for me a little bit. I don't know that I wholeheartedly. I understand. Maybe you're saying that it still needs to take place, but maybe a later conversation.
Mm-hmm.
Because for me, I always get to yes, I believe in human flourishing, or I believe in well-being, human well-being, and I say, well, what if we were able to establish that we dispatch of those who have an IQ of 130 or less, and there's less suffering and there's less struggle, and we
Yeah,
have a more flourishing society. So, but you're saying perhaps that would come up, but just later on in the conversation. Is that your point?
kind of. The point that I like my my approach to a lot of this type of, because in order to prove the existence of a grounding or a need of a grounding, one, you need to show the is ought problem. And then once you've exposed the problem, you have to provide the solution. And as a Catholic, even though we have a solution, it's difficult to present that solution in a way that's very balanced. Because if you go too far on one end, now you're back to divine command theory and it's arbitrary. And if you go too far to the other end, now you're too far on the natural law side, where God is not necessary as a grounding for the oughtness of the situation. So the Catholic's ability, or the Christian's ability, to overcome the is ought problem is possible, but difficult. I'm not sure if it's possible for an atheist, but the fact of the matter is that after we've established the reason givers, then we can have a conversation about the is ought problem. And if they're able to succeed, now we're able to have a conversation about their grounding, and maybe we can use that, like St. Paul's altar to the unknown God, and say, see what you're describing? This is what I believe as well. As opposed to it being this butting of heads.
Yeah, well said. I don't think I disagree with. I think I disagree with any of that. Okay, so before I had just one question about something else, but you're going to be debating on divine hiddenness. You need to watch if you have not already.
So the debate is on the contingency argument, but I did a video already on divine hiddenness.
Okay. Have you ever watched Gregory Pine and Alex O'Connor's conversation on divine hiddenness?
No. So and this is maybe a fault that I gotta start working on, but when I was in seminary, I had the great privilege to have Bishop Barron come and do a little talk for the seminarian class, because he came up for some other situation, and the priest in charge of the seminary invited him down, and Bishop Barron graciously agreed. And this was back when Facebook was first starting out, and people were talking about, you might know this terminology, new evangelization, about using social media as a way to evangelize. And so someone asked Bishop Barron about his advice on utilizing new evangelization. And his response was, if you want to be good at the new evangelization, master the old. What you're going to notice is a lot of these people are going to have questions about stuff that was talked about by the early church, by Thomas Aquinas, by these church doctors. So go and master the old stuff, so then you can answer the people in this new evangelization, which is what I've done. And it's actually worked out fairly well, so maybe I should keep doing it. But it has led to where I don't look at a lot of the more modern talkers like Alex O'Connor. I'm aware of them, but I haven't really dove deep into them, because in my experience, almost every single argument I've come across has been a regurgitation of something that's already been talked about in the past. I think a really good, funny example, there's a content creator on here by the name of Allegedly Ian. And he formatted an argument against the existence of God that he was extremely proud of, and talked about how this was his original argument. And so, of course, people wouldn't be aware of it because he and talked about how this was his original argument. And so, of course, people wouldn't be aware of it because he.
So he came up with a new argument against the existence of God.
Yep.
And whenever it comes up, and there's never a new argument, by the way, for but go ahead though. Yeah, go ahead, please.
So,
yes.
and that's exactly what I pointed out. I sent him a message saying, actually, this argument, like, you should be proud of it for coming up with it on your own organically, but it's not new. Aristotle came up with this argument in his physics.
Yes.
So
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
this has been
Yeah.
something that theologians wrestled and talked about long before you brought it up.
I agree. Yes. So
So
you need, go ahead. You
so
need to
that's
watch Pine and Aquinas, or Pine and O'Connor,
mhm,
because Pine uses nothing more than Thomistic philosophy. And in fact, even at one point, although it's much more robust than I'm going to
mhm.
present it, he says, "Hey, listen, I'm nothing more than a Thomistic hack," is what he says. I'm just going to say what Aquinas says. And Aquinas would basically say that my epistological backstop is that God has given sufficient knowledge for him to be known, and he didn't say it in such an
Mhm.
abrupt manner, but basically, you're just refusing to do it. It's basically what he said in a much more kind,
Yeah.
articulate manner. He said that truth. And so you would actually, I think, appreciate the argument that he had. It was really good.
Okay, I'll check it out. But yeah, like I said, because of my focus on the more classical theology and stuff like that, it's caused a gap. As I tell people, the most modern philosopher that I've actually dealt in a deep, serious way was Nietzsche. After that, good luck.
All right, that's interesting. So my whole question was to first thanks, but second to say, give me your take on Plantinga's modal ontological argument for the
Ooh,
existence of
ooh!
God.
Actually, I did read that. I did read that.
Okay.
Um, and the reason why I read it was because someone heard my critique of Anselm's ontological argument, and they said, "Hey, read this by Plantinga," and I read it, and his points against especially Anselm's ontological argument, were exactly the points that I was making. So it was just kind of like a victory dance of like, oh, one of the most well-respected philosophers on theistic arguments is saying exactly what I've been saying. Uh,
Let me compliment you on that because I've never had an original thought in my head. Everything I have is ripped off from somebody I've read, and I have no original thoughts
Well,
whatsoever. I just read.
what
Yeah.
same for me. Like my thing was I was extrapolating and pulling from and using Aquinas's arguments against Anselm, while also having a really good understanding of what Anselm's argument was and why the critiques against it failed. But still ultimately agreeing with Aquinas on why the ontological argument fails, because it's I love the way Plantinga describes it. It is sound but unsatisfying, because it is effectively a circular argument, even though it doesn't actually commit that fallacy. The way that Aquinas puts it is that the reason why the ontological argument fails is because God's nature, aka his definition, is the very thing that's in question. If God's nature is his own existence, and we define it as such, well, now we're defining and putting in as the very first premise the very thing that people are questioning, the existence of God.
Yes, I agree. I've never found. I love the argument. Actually, I first was very. What is this? This is circularity. The more I studied, I found out it was really brilliant,
Yep.
and then I found it not compelling to any unbeliever that I've ever shared it with. So
Yeah.
I've went through the full cycle
Yep.
of walking through that argument. The more I read it, I thought, oh my gosh, this is brilliant. It's
Yes.
absolutely brilliantly written. You know,
As
if this
as I
if
tell
this
as I tell people, I love it like one would love a piece of art, because it is beautiful logic. But
well said.
it doesn't actually do anything in
It
the
doesn't.
practical world.
It doesn't move the needle. It doesn't move the needle. You're
Yeah.
exactly right. All right, last one, then, and I promise you. First of all, man, it's always a pleasure to talk to you.
Same here.
Conversation. So you mentioned it in your writing to me. Your rejection. I don't want to have a debate about it. Your rejection of divine command theory.
Yeah.
Why would you say? I would reject that, Jeff. I don't think that's a good thing. Why would you disagree with it?
So partially because at the Council of Trent, that was one of the major things. While they don't outright reject divine command theory simpliciter, because technically natural law theory still is a kind of divine command theory, and it's kind of similar to, like, say, the church's position on predestination. The church never condemned predestination in and of itself. What they condemned was Calvin's interpretation of predestination. So if by divine command theory you just mean that God is the ultimate grounding of all of morality, you and I agree. And that's why I was saying we got to get away from this language of objective, subjective. We got to get into whether or not there are reason givers. Because the most extreme, and this is the position that Martin Luther held that was condemned by the council, is if God commanded to do something evil, now that evil becomes good. So there's no reason behind it other than arbitrariness. But if
but explain that, because that's obviously, I think, the fallacy in the Euthyphro dilemma is that I believe that the grounding is that God's very nature is good.
So then so the way that I describe it is like this. You and I have the grounding of our existence in God, correct?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
But we have our own ontological existence, right? Like, it's not that we exist separate from God, but our existence is also our own, correct?
Agreed.
Okay. Goodness is the same thing. It might get its grounding from God, but its goodness is its own. So God couldn't command something that isn't good to then make it good, because that's now a contradiction. That would be like saying, I am going to make Sports World be human and not human, because that's now a contradiction. That would be like saying, I am going to make Sports World be human and not human. It's something with my internet. Sometimes it's good where it only disconnects maybe once. I don't know what it is with today. But the difference between divine command theory and natural law theory is quite literally the question of, is morality arbitrary?
Of course not. Yeah. For me, it would be not either. Yep.
So if you agree that morality is not arbitrary, then that means that you can use your natural reason to come to understand God, even if it's what God commands and God is the source of that. That is what the Catholic Church professes as natural law theory. But that's not what Martin Luther was professing. He believed that God genuinely could have said, go and lie. And lying now would be good. He genuinely believed that the only way we can come to know moral truths is because God told it to us, because it is 100% arbitrary. He didn't think there were reasons behind the moral system that we were given. He thought it was just an arbitrary decision, an arbitrary decree by God, and that's what I reject. And this is something that I have discovered. Really well-educated Protestants and really well-educated Catholics, turns out we actually agree more than we disagree, even on areas that seem like we disagree on.
Yeah, I'm going to give you one more that you may reject, but I find it funny because I was talking to you as you said something about Calvinism. I would lean toward Reformed theology. Mm-hmm. I've read some, and I cannot get the exact quote, but I read something from Aquinas that actually affirms a lot of what I would believe, that man, God's John 6, God says He draws us unto Himself, and that's the reason. And then upon that drawing, we freely choose Him. And everyone else is left to their free choice, and they reject God based upon their free choice. Yep. I will tell you, that sounds firmly Calvinistic to me. So, it sounds like, because I don't embrace double predestination.
Yeah. So, but Calvin did embrace double predestination. So the difference between what Thomas Aquinas, and I actually do disagree with his presentation of it. I hold to a different understanding of predestination.
What is wrong with you disagreeing? You got a Protestant agreeing with Aquinas more than you do? That's on you, dude. They're gonna kick you out of the camp. You better be careful.
Well, no. So actually, I would say that I think Thomas Aquinas would appreciate that, because if you look at his writings, he pulled from Plato, Aristotle, Augustine, Moses Maimonides, who was one of the greatest Jewish rabbis, as well as Avicenna and Averroes. Yes.
I'm reading a lot of Avicenna and Averroes right now. And interestingly, real quick as an aside, you'll appreciate, I was at a Dominican Catholic church in New York City, and has Thomas Aquinas in the stained glass window, and right below, to the right of him, is Aristotle.
Yeah.
It's hilarious. It's awesome.
Yeah, Aristotle is kind of we call him the pagan doctor of the church.
I got you. Yeah, the philosopher. Yes, that's right. Yes.
But anyway, so he pulled from truth regardless of where it came from, and rejected things that weren't true, even if they came from his own side. And so the fact that I'm doing the same thing, I think Thomas Aquinas would appreciate more than people who just blindly follow what he says and only stick to what he says. But
I was only being sarcastic.
No,
I was
just
being sarcastic.
Yeah, no, I know. But it people have brought that up to me, and so I always like to point that out. It's like, maybe not. But
Yeah.
To get to what you were saying, the difference between
Yeah.
Calvinistic predestination and something like Thomas Aquinas or what the Catholic Church holds is because it's hard to understand how is God passing over someone and not giving them the efficacious grace necessary for salvation, not the same as him choosing to damn them to hell. Well, I had a realization. Are you familiar with the Catholic Church position called limbo of the fathers? Not limbo of the infants, limbo of the fathers, where Abraham and the other patriarchs resided before Jesus died on the cross.
No, I have a Protestant notion of it, but I probably couldn't articulate the Catholic notion of it.
Okay. So I mean, and it might be similar, but the understanding is that before Jesus died on the cross, those who were not damned to hell were residing in a waiting place, waiting for the doors to heaven to be open. So, just keep that in mind as I go through this. It is Catholic understanding that God gives sufficient grace to everyone. Now, sufficient grace is the amount of grace required to be able to accept God's gift of salvation. Efficacious grace is the grace that God gives that compels one to act. Now, God gives both of these graces from the beginning of time. Now, how that relationship works with free will, that's something that's up to discussion and debate. But let us imagine that someone existed after Jesus died on the cross, and they committed no sin. They never rejected God, right? Now, you and I both agree that you cannot earn your way into heaven, right?
Agreed.
Okay. So even though they committed no sin and they did all of these virtuous acts, they could never knock on the door and demand God to let them in because of their actions, because heaven is a free gift. Now, in this hypothetical, God promised he would never do this, but in this hypothetical, let us say that God did not give the efficacious grace, or the grace required for one to have in order to be able to enter eternity with him. But if hell is a free rejection of God, and this person never rejected God, then would they be in hell?
Yeah, for me as a Protestant, I think that the question of like the innocent person who has not sinned is such a hypothetical that I can't wrap my mind around that. That would be
Well,
impossible for me
but
to
that's the
yeah.
thing. That's the thing. That's where the limbo of the fathers comes in. Because the patriarchs were in that situation I was describing. They could not receive that efficacious grace until Christ died on the cross. But because they didn't reject God, they weren't in hell.
So yeah, so we would actually, I probably would say that the pre-resurrection saints, the Old
Mm-hmm.
Testament, that they were in Abraham's bosom, right? That
Which
they
is
were.
still
Wait,
not, that, and Abraham's bosom is the same thing as the patriarch or the limbo of the patriarchs, because
agreed.
it's not heaven. Like
But
that
I
is
would say that they're. I agree, but I would say that they were saved based upon their looking forward to the Messiah, as those who are
which
post
is
Christ are looking
yeah,
back to the
which
Messiah. Yeah,
is why they were able to receive the efficacious grace after the cross.
yeah.
But my point is that there are individuals that existed, even if it was only temporary. There were individuals that existed that did not reject God, yet could not enter heaven because they had not received that grace. That is why God passing someone over and not giving the efficacious grace to them is not the same as him choosing them to go to hell. These are people that chose heaven, and if it wasn't for the efficacious grace, they'd be in limbo.
I'll have to think through that. For me,
Let
it's paradoxical. For me, it's
it, it,
paradoxical,
let me
and so I
send you
embrace the
something.
paradox.
Let me send you something I wrote on it, because I do I
Okay.
bring out at least like the
Yeah.
Catechism of the Catholic Church and the different positions to help explain it. That
Sure.
Since it'll have those resources, it might help you parse through it a little bit easier.
Yeah. Hey, dude, always a joy to talk to you, man. We probably killed your audience though with nerd talk, so maybe you can get onto something else, man. But such a joy to
Honestly,
talk to you.
that's why they're here. A lot of them, like I was saying
Okay, good.
before you came up, is a lot of them were in a Discord server, and they're not believers. but they love the way that I break down and explain theology and the Christian faith in such a way that's different
Yeah.
from a lot of the unfortunately hateful rhetoric that they hear.
Amen.
They want to hear
Amen.
more of my voice. So,
Yeah, and we do it as we do it as Protestants and Catholics as well, in a
yes.
way that's just. I mean, this is not. Yeah, I mean, and obviously we're going to say that we have differences on what we believe, and those
Mm-hmm.
are really important. We're not trying to diminish them, and
Yeah.
we're not trying to compromise truth for the sake of being
Yep.
friends. But nevertheless, this is it's not helpful. I will tell you that your IQ is going to go down when you watch that Jesus and whatnot debate. He did a great job. He
Mm-hmm.
did a good job of staying calm, but it was just an interlocutor who didn't even know
Yeah.
the terms he was using, I think. And I don't think it's helpful, right? Because they don't even understand. She didn't understand the
Yeah.
argument, I don't think. And he was very patient. He did a good job as much as you could.
Mm-hmm.
Your head would have blown up. So it's not a, it
Yeah.
was just so,
Like I said,
yeah, it
no,
wasn't
my disagreement with him is not an indication of hatred towards him or anything like
same.
that. It's I don't agree with some of his positions. Based on my understanding, I don't think he's in danger of saying something that would separate him from the church, but I don't agree with it all the same.
Aren't you glad that some of the stuff that I did as a 19-year-old was not recorded and put on it too? So I'm grateful that, you know what I mean. I'm much older, went to school a lot longer, but he's a
Yeah,
good. I pray for him, and I pray that God
yeah.
will continue to use him. And man, hey, it's a pleasure to talk to you. I look forward to reading what you send to me, and have a great night, buddy.
You
Thank you.
too as well. Thanks for coming up. All right. Uh, Thank you everyone for joining. I see Lou that you've joined and have been supporting. Thank you for all the heart me's, and thank you Nobody on Fire and Lou for the Go Populars. Yeah, Lou, he and I actually spoke last week. I don't think you were there for that. And he runs a podcast as well. I think it's called Sunday Talks. Let me double check. And I'll pull it up. But he invited me onto his podcast early next year, hopefully. We need to iron out those details, but he did invite me onto his podcast. But let me see, what was it? It was... Actually, I got a better way to find it. Let me see the channel. Sunday Huddle. Okay, yeah. Wasn't Sunday Talk, Sunday Huddle is the name of the YouTube channel. But yeah, it turns out I'm like 4 hours away from where he hosts the podcast, so we might be able to work something out next year. But yeah, once again, for those that are just joining in, a couple of updates. I did a video on divine hiddenness that is on my YouTube channel. Please let me know if you like that particular style of content where it's not scripted. I used to do videos that had a script. I'm trying out to see how it goes where I don't have a script, see which people prefer more. Let me know what you think of it. I've also just got, it's now official, where I am doing a debate on Mega Bloodbath's channel against Leo Philo on the contingency argument. That's going to be Saturday, September 5th at 8 p.m. Central Time. And as far as upcoming content, I want to continue doing stuff where I'm doing analysis on arguments for God as well as analysis on arguments against God. But after the Joe Schmidt conversion, I've had several people come up to me and say, man, I'm disappointed in Joe Schmidt's reasons for converting because I thought your justifications for being Catholic were so much better than the reasons that he presented. So I might do a series breaking down that process. But yeah, that's what I've got in the works so far. As far as what I'm thinking of doing in the future. But once again, thank you everyone for joining. Thank you everyone for the new follows and the support. But yeah, currently don't have any guests in the request box. So if you're 18 or older and you're got an argument for or against God that you want someone to look over and help you in your formation of it, and or just have a question about the Catholic faith or philosophy in general, I'll be more than happy to answer it. The reason why I say this isn't a debate is this isn't going to be me trying to convince you to become Catholic, and I ask that you don't try to convince me not to become Catholic. That's not the format or reason for this live. There's lots of other lives that are designed to do that, and that's not what I want to be doing. But yeah, definitely, Lou, I'll be telling Shay that you said hi. But as far as anyone that has got a question as far as coming up into the guest request box is currently open. I see nobody on fire. Thanks for the crown and the other gifts. Thank you everyone for the support. But let's see. I guess someone outside has upset the dogs. I don't know if y'all can hear it. But let's see. But let's see. So Angel, so as far as the question of like why didn't God just kill Satan? So and first off, angelic beings don't live in the same way that you and I do. They exist, but they don't have life, so they can't be killed. So then the question is, well, why doesn't, if God is the reason for their existence, why doesn't he just remove them from existence? That then creates a contradiction. So God had to have not created Satan in the first place whatsoever. So then the question is then, well, why then did God create Satan? Thomas Aquinas describes these types of questions about questions of fittingness. We don't know why God created Satan, but there was still good, even though Satan is about as far removed from God as you can get, there is still good in the existence of Satan in and of itself, in so much as the fact that he has ontological grounding in God. And so then the question is, well, what good is God able to accomplish from the existence of Satan? And that is where the argument of fittingness comes in from, where we're now looking not why God had to make Satan, but what ultimate good is accomplished through Satan's existence that helps God achieve his ultimate good better than if Satan did not exist. It's the same question for the cross. God could have forgiven Adam and Eve right then and there, but he decided to do it through the cross. So now the question is, what was God's goal such that the cross was the best way to accomplish it, such that not using cross would have been a lesser way to accomplish that? Technically, nobody on fire, yes. Plato did have a favorite plate that... Oh, you're asking if he had a favorite plate where the plate that was his favorite was the plate form. No. So the Platonic form of the plate would have existed immaterially. So even though his favorite, would have had a favorite plate, the very fact that it existed materially would mean that it could not be the Platonic form of the plate. Because the very fact of it existing in the physical material realm means that it has imperfections, just like any drawing or any representation of a triangle is not a perfect representation of the actual geometric triangle. Thereby, the very thing that you're creating doesn't create a triangle, because it has imperfections that are just not present in a triangle. Fire Ninja, I'm probably going to give it another 20 minutes at least, unless I get another guest up. Currently, I don't have a guest requesting, but, been having some good conversation with the people in the chat. And as far as the, going beyond that, if no one shows up, I'll just probably call it at 7 o'clock. So Angel, life is a biological system. In order to have life, You need to grow, change, adapt, have reproduction, and several other factors in order to be life. Angels don't have that. Do they exist? Yes. Are they agents? Yes. But they're not alive in the way that you and I are alive. So as I was saying earlier, Flannel, as far as like on the is-ought problem for morals, I would need to do more research, but I do think if there is some kind of objective grounding of goodness in and of itself, then there is an ought for why you ought to do a particular action. Whereas someone that doesn't have that, they might know that a thing is good, and they choose to do that thing because it's good, but there's nothing compelling them to do it. It's a personal code, which I'm fine with. Like, if that's what you want to do, that is sufficient, even if it's not the fullness of it. No, Heath, I do not make the argument from the Trinity from the perspective of God being all loving. There was actually, when I was in seminary, and I wish I could find the guy because the argument just made me laugh. There was an individual that tried to make the argument that God had to be a Trinity because of him being all loving. And the argument went something like, you have the Father, and in order to be all loving, there needs to be something to love. Well, there's the Son. Now there's that love. But a love is more perfectly when it's shared among more people. That's the Holy Spirit. And then he just arbitrarily stops at the Holy Spirit. But if love is made more perfect in the more people that it's loved, then why does it stop at 3? Why not 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, or 9? And so because of that, I don't think one can argue towards God necessarily being a Trinity. In fact, that is what it means for it to be a mystery, is that it is not something that we can reason towards or prove via necessity. It is something that has been shown to us through revelation, and we can show how God revealed it through scriptures, and we can show analogies on what this type of relation is, but it's not, and so we can show why it might not be illogical or contrary to the laws of logic, but it is not the case where one can use logic to show that God has to be a Trinity. But, and then I think there was another question that I saw. Why is God multi-personal? I think that kind of touched into what Heath was talking about, Fire Ninja. I don't know why God is multi-personal. I just know that he is, due to the fact that he revealed that aspect of his existence to us. It's not something that we could ever come to reason, and we don't know why he is that particular way. All right. But yeah, currently don't have anyone in the request box. So I see we've got 13 people watching. So once again, thank you all for thank you all for the support. Thank you for the gifts. I see we're sitting at 15,000 likes. I think that's actually the most likes I've gotten so far. But yeah, thank you everyone for the support. If you've got a question or an argument that you want to workshop, whether it's for or against theism, feel free to request up, and I'll be more than happy to help. I haven't had repeat arguments, Dan. All of them been kind of unique. I guess the most common one is that I've had people present different arguments from the five ways, but I've only been doing this for about 2 weeks or so. So it's, I haven't had the chance for people to be presenting the same arguments over and over. All right. The strongest argument for the existence of God is probably going to be, in my opinion, the contingency argument, coupled with Aquinas' argument from on being in essence. I think those two together do a very good job of showing the need for a necessary existing thing and then establishing the nature that this necessary existing thing would have. As far as the strongest argument against, that's kind of like asking what is the strongest argument, in my perspective, the strongest argument against 2 + 2 = 4. But I think the hardest problem to, or the hardest argument to respond to is probably going to be the problem of suffering, not the problem of evil. Because depending on how evil is defined and understood, it's actually very easy to respond to. But the problem of suffering is a lot harder to respond to because of the emotional aspect to it. And people have suffered greatly, and I want to be respectful of that. And any response to it is in danger of delegitimizing their pain and suffering, which is not something that I want to do. So the argument from suffering is, in my opinion, probably the hardest argument that I would respond against. And then as far as running the argument from motion frequently, no. Ever since I've learned B theory of time, I never used it. And even before that, I liked the first cause argument for a long time. And then I learned of on being in essence, and part of the reason why I love the on being in essence argument so much is before I read it, when I was like 18, I was like, all right, you know what? I'm going to pretend I'm an atheist, and I'm going to pretend that God doesn't exist. Am I able to go from this to a God existing? And the argument that I ended up on arriving at is almost identical to the argument that Thomas Aquinas puts forth in his book On Being in Essence. So I was really, really happy with that, and that's why that particular argument and the contingency argument are my two currently favorite arguments. As far as unnecessary suffering problem, I actually do have a video on it that talks about, that goes against, I think, one of the strongest arguments for the existence of unnecessary suffering. And I forget exactly how I respond to it, but on my YouTube channel, it is called... Let me get it pulled up. But if I may do a little self-plug, it's called Impossible Evil. And I think that is one of the... I am responding to what I think is the best argument for the existence of unnecessary suffering. And it's an ontological argument, so the logic behind it is very subtle. And so it's hard for me to describe what exactly it's doing just off the top of my head due to the fact that it's a very subtle argument. It's a really good argument, but it's a very subtle argument, and if I was to attempt to just do it on the fly, I'm worried I might do it injustice. But yeah, so Happy Dad of 3 and Gravity Bends, if you want an answer to those questions, I would recommend go into, shoot me a DM and I can either get it over to you, or just go to my YouTube channel, Catholic Thinker, and it's called Impossible Evil. And I go over the argument and I explain what the argument is and why it's a really good argument, and then I give my response to it. But let's see. Currently don't have any guests in the request box. But I think this is the most amount of people that I've had join alive. Welcome in, Sir Piffington. And let's see. I mean, and that very well could be the case, Dan. But as far as like the, because what I did was I, studied it. I talked to people who did know it very well, made sure that my understanding of it was correct, and then I made my response to it, and they seem to be happy with my response. But if you feel like that I don't understand it, check it out. Let me know why I'm wrong. But yeah, again, thank you everyone for joining. Like I was telling someone, I think the most amount of people I've had on watching a live at the same time was 5 people at once. We're currently sitting at 16 viewers, so thank you everyone for joining, and even if it's just in the chat. And actually, Gravity Bend, so that's the very point that the author was making, is that if there is suffering that is justified by something else, by something external to it, then there exists a possible world where that external justification for that suffering doesn't exist. Thus, it's unnecessary suffering, even if in the actual world that justification for it does exist in this world. Because it could not exist, that makes the suffering unnecessary, which was a brilliant move on the author. So that is the so that when I was talking about it being a subtle thing, like, to explain the model logic that's taking on is really, really complex to do. Because a lot of people don't intuit necessary and contingent and the possible world semantics very well. So even though it exists actually in this world, then it doesn't mean that it's impossible for it to have been otherwise. And that's what he rests his argument on. And like I said, it's a brilliantly done argument. Correct, Gravity Bend. So that's the argument, and according to model logic, it's correct. And his whole argument is based on, if there is something that is necessary about the existence of God, and God is a necessary being, and there is a possible world that is contradictory to the existence of God, then that means that God can't exist, because there is now a possible world that he can't exist in. And he uses that by the existence of this unnecessary suffering, and the way he justifies this particular kind of unnecessary suffering existing is beautifully done. I think it's a really well done argument. But like I was saying, like, the reason why I want to be careful on talking about it is, one, I'm trying to get my YouTube channel a little bit, so there's a little bit of that selfish side, and two, it's the case of I haven't touched on that particular argument because I haven't seen it presented in so long that the particulars of it are fuzzy for me. Well, Gravity Bends, I didn't give my response to it. I gave his argument. I told you what his argument was as to why God doesn't exist. So if you think that it was uninformative and unsatisfying, then either you think that his argument fails, or I didn't do a good job of explaining his argument on the fly, like I had said I was worried of doing. But Kevin, let me see if I can find what your question was. Well, I'm not sure what you mean, Kelvin, by the categorical imperative and the one person in Bethesda. Categorical imperative and the one person in Bethesda. But yeah, if what I would recommend Gravity Bends is check out the video. In fact, if he's still here, Nobody on Fire was actually the one to present that argument to me, and asked me to in that. Well, Gravity Bends, that's the way that modal logic works, and that was his argument on why unnecessary suffering exists. And he does talk about two different types of unnecessary suffering, which I do go into and touch on. Like I said, check the video out. I do a pretty deep dive into it. And if he's still in here, Nobody on Fire, say something in chat if you're still here. But he was the one to recommend that argument to me. Well, it's not a theodicy because the argument he's making is against Christianity. So it's not applying a theodicy at all or an explanation against the existence of evil. It's showing how theodicy is ineffective to explain the existence of this evil. So, like, but the whole, actually, let me see. Let me see. Because it was done as a thesis for this guy's, it was this guy's doctorate thesis. But yeah, Nobody on Fire was the one to recommend it. Brownson the Third, yep. But yeah, by the way, Nobody on Fire, did you ever check the video out? Because I know I was speaking to you and Solvernia, and I know when I last talked to you, granted it was some months ago, you said you hadn't had a chance to check it out, but I think Solvernia appreciated the way the argument was structured. But I think I'm going to go ahead and call it. Okay, yeah. But yeah, as far as the but yeah, the fact that you didn't come screaming to me, Nobody on Fire, as far as yeah, the video title is Impossible Evil. But yeah, the fact that you come screaming to me, Nobody on Fire, saying, "Oh, you miss, Catholic thinker, you missed this point," I think is a testament to the fact that I at least understood the material. But let me do this, or maybe we both just didn't understand it. But let me. But all right. But yeah, currently don't have. Oh, I see you just said you found it. Happy Dad of 3. I also just sent it to you in DMs. But I think I'm gonna go ahead and call it. Once again, thank you everyone for joining. I don't think that's necessary to know Happy Dad of 3 for the contingency argument. Oh man, yeah, you just made it right at the end, Adriana. Or no, you prefer, it's pronounced Adrian, but because of the Adrianarchy, it always confuses people, if I remember correctly. But yeah, I don't think Happy Dad of 3, just real quick before I sign off, that one needs to know which qualities of the universe are necessary and contingent. You just need to know that a contingent things exist. or if contingent things exist, what they entail, and if one can exist in a world without necessity, and then if we're unable to live in a world without necessity, what that entails. And those are a different series of arguments. But if you want to hear more of my thoughts on the contingency argument, I am actually, and I'll do this last little plug before I sign off, I am doing a debate on September 5th. Let me double check. Yeah, it's September 5th, at 8 p.m. Central Time on Mega Bloodbath's channel, where I will be debating on the contingency argument. So, feel free to jump in. I will be addressing that. I do have a video as well, Happy Data 3, on at least the Modell contingency argument, as well as a short that does address something that I didn't realize about it. But as far as necessitarianism, it depends on whether you're a hard or soft necessitarianist. It is Leo Philo, I think is how you pronounce the name. Let me double check. Leo Philius is the name of the person that I'm debating. But yeah, if you want to hear me debate on the contingency argument, feel free to show up for that. I'm looking forward to it. And once again, thank you everyone for all of the support. I think this has been one of my better performing lives as far as viewers and likes and everything else, so I definitely appreciate it, and looking forward to next time.